I would consider myself a semi-professional disc golfer, meaning that I play for money in the open professional division, but I don't sustain my living by playing disc golf. I know the term pro disc golfer is thrown around a decent bit, but just because we have pro divisions and amateur divisions, but in my opinion, a pro disc golfer is someone who makes their living from being an athlete in disc golf. I'm more of a pro content creator, media side of things, aspiring to be a pro disc golfer, but currently definitely very semi-pro. So I want to walk through 2024 and see how much I made or lost just playing disc golf. Spoiler from the title, I lost money. And this would be a pretty expensive hobby, or for me, kind of inexpensive running this channel, because I want to share the journey going from someone who had just started playing when I started my channel to hopefully eventually being a professional athlete, a professional disc golfer. But I'm grateful that I am a pro on the media side now so that I can kind of bankroll all of this. So thank you so much. Let's get into it. One interesting thing is this was my second year playing professional disc golf in the Mixed Pro Open MPO division. And in 2023, I actually made more money than I did in 2024. In 2023, I made $2,473 and took less trips. I only played one event that was on the Disc Golf Pro Tour, and it was a silver event, the Kansas City Wide Open, where I actually ended up cashing. I made $360, and I cashed at every single event, meaning that I was in the top 40% of players in every single event except for one, where I missed the cash line by one stroke, which is my first pro event, and I actually got a win. But 2024 looked very different for me. I actually played significantly worse, probably a lot of compounding factors that I've already talked about, and I'm excited for 2025 because I'll be playing a lot more, and hopefully this recap next year is going to be significantly more profitable. But if we just look at my 2025 at a glance on the PDGA page, we can see I had prizes of $1,705. But I also played 17 tournaments instead of the 11 that I played in 2023, and I played significantly more events that were on the Pro Tour or that were qualifiers. So I actually tracked my expenses for this year, and in 2024, including fees, I lost $1,022.63, and that is my earnings from PDGA, $1,705, minus what I paid in entry fees, including the PayPal and disc golf scene fees. I didn't include things like the Trilogy Challenge or the MVP Space Race that I did just for content. This is more looking at like the athlete side and how much I made or lost there. Some things will be confounded because I'm making content when I'm on the road, but this is treating everything as if I was just an athlete. Some interesting things from here is I played 15 events that I could have made money at, and I only cashed in 5 of them, which is pretty abysmal. I cashed in a third or 33% of the events. Every time that I did cash, I made an average of $341, which is probably because in one event I got 4th at an A tier and I made $975, which is my biggest payout of my career so far. $375 more than my first professional open win. My average entry fee was $159.80, which is actually very high because a lot of the events that I played were on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. I had a Pro Tour Plus event at Waco, which cost $364.51, including all the fees, $350 plus $14.51 in fees. I played a qualifier for the Open at Austin where I had a blow-up hole in the last hole and ended up not making it in. So that qualifier plus the fees for the Open at Austin ended up costing me just about $70, and I had no chance to make money there because I didn't even get into the tournament. I played the Dynamic Disc Open, which is $350, the Portland Open, which is $350, Beaver State Fling, which is $350, and 3Q Series, which averaged about $150 to $170 a piece. So I played a lot of bigger events, and that's where a lot of the larger entry fees came in. This year I'm planning on playing a lot more Flex Starts, C tiers, kind of local stuff, which will mellow out the average entry fee, but I still am planning on playing, I think, 5 or 6 bigger events, Elite Series or Majors, if I can get into them. And I will be traveling for those. And we will get into the travel costs as well. There's only one cost that I'm not including in this, and I'll tell you about that at the end of this video. And I might include it for next year, but I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it yet. So my total costs were just over $2,700, which is what netted me that negative $1,022.63. But like any sport athletic endeavor that you're going to be doing, especially if you're traveling to it, there are going to be a lot of other fees, which in my case were mainly Airbnb fees, planes, car rentals, and then mileage, because I took 2 big trips where I actually ended up taking my own car to some Pro Tour events. The raw cost ended up being cheaper than renting a car. I traveled for a total of 7 weeks in which I played tournaments or was traveling for them. Beginning in March, I went 2 weeks in Texas for Waco and Austin. Then in May, I went and played the Dynamic Disc Open in Emporia, and I'm located in Denver right now, so it was just a drive out to Emporia, about an 8.5-hour drive, 550 miles each way, I believe. And then I took a bigger trip, which was 4 weeks, where I did the Pacific Northwest swing. I first played the Cascade Challenge just outside of Seattle in Shelton, Washington. Then I drove south and played the 2 tournaments that were in Portland on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. And then I played on the way back home a tournament in Utah, in Ogden, I believe, the Beehive Classic, which is played at the Fort. And so we'll look at the mileage for that. And there's actually 2 ways that we can calculate that, which brings this total kind of astronomically high. Airbnbs this year, I spent $4,822.68 across 7 different weeks, so just under $700 per week, which is slightly, actually lower than I expected. I thought it'd be closer to $800 to $1,000, but there was one Airbnb that I kind of split in Emporia, and one that was only for 5 days, which is going to take a couple $100 off of it. Planes, I only included my own planes. My wife did come. She was actually pregnant. We now have a young, beautiful baby girl. So this year is going to potentially be even a little bit more expensive and crazy, and is why our travel is a little bit less than it was last year, at least on par. It's not increasing this year. Hopefully 2026 I can do a full tour if the channel continues to kind of stay at the level that it is or grows a little bit. And there's some other things that have to happen behind the scenes that hopefully my wife can either go part-time or leave her job, and we can go and tour and try it out for a couple years. Those expense breakdowns, I'm sure, will be ridiculous 2026 and beyond. But for planes, these just were my flights, which were to Texas and then to Charlotte for the United States Disc Golf Championship qualifying, in which I did not get in. And those were $450.94. And then car rentals were only for Texas and then 1 day at the USDGC in Charlotte, which amounted to $1,162.31. So $7,500 is what I made less than what I earned from playing disc golf this last year. I'm also not including like sponsorships or any extracurriculars, because I think this video is more to show what this costs as a more general hobby or endeavor for somebody to get into. And you can do it in a van or in a car, and those can make things a little bit cheaper. There are definitely trade-offs for that. But for most people trying to get into it, you're probably going to be spending a similar amount, if not a little bit less, than some of these expenses on a weekly basis, which we'll break down after we go over how much it costs me to take my car different places. Hopefully there's income that can offset that for you guys, like there is for me from this channel, as well as sponsors. But looking at this is pretty raw numbers. So if we look at the gas cost, we're going to take a look at the trip to Emporia, which is 1,090 round trip miles. And the way that I calculated this is just from Denver to Emporia. No fluff around, even though there's definitely hundreds of miles that I drove, especially on the second trip to the Pacific Northwest, when I was in the areas just going about business and doing things. Also didn't include meals, because you have to eat anywhere that you are, even though it's probably a little more expensive when you're traveling, because you're probably eating out more often. You don't have those staples like you do back at home. But it was just a little too complicated to get into all of that for everything. So driving to Emporia at 1,090 miles, our cars got an average of about 23 miles to the gallon. And so it probably took 47.3 gallons to get to Emporia and back with the car. Now I assumed $3 per gallon cost, even though, especially on the second trip to the Pacific Northwest, it was decently more expensive in most of the time that we were in Washington and Oregon. This might be the most self-aware gas station that I don't know if I love or hate. This is the price for gas, an arm and diesels alike. But just $3 is a nice round number. So it probably cost $142.17 to drive my car to Emporia and back. But you also put 1,100 miles on a car. And so for tax purposes, the IRS actually gives mileage allowance when you are deducting mileage for business expenses. And that allowance in 2024 was 67 cents per mile, because they're assuming gas plus maintenance and depreciation on your car, because your car loses value the more miles you put on it quicker, and you're also going to have to do more maintenance the quicker you put miles on the car. So at 67 cents per mile, if we were just using the IRS mileage, which is what will end up being written off because I was able to make content and was trying to make money playing disc golf, that $142 of an expense, or a real cost, turns into $730 of an expense, which, I mean, 1,000 miles extra on a car, I don't know exactly where that fits in. It maybe is a little bit generous. Maybe it depends on the type of car that you have, but that gets even crazier when we look at the Pacific Northwest trip, because going to Seattle, Portland, Utah, and then back to Denver was 2,736 miles, according to Google Maps, just those straight line trips. But at 23 miles a gallon, it's 118.9 gallons of gas, which amounts to $356.87 of a real cost. It was probably a little higher because gas is a little more expensive there, but nice round numbers keep things easy. And if we take our 67 cent per mile allowance from the IRS, it's $1,833.12 for those 2,736 miles. So all in all, taking my own car places was $499, probably a real cost. A little bit conservative, definitely on the low end. But when we take the IRS allowance, it's $2,563.42. So if we go back to our $7,500 of a loss already, and we add in the real gas cost, we're now at just under $8,000 of a realized loss, which for every week on the road that I had, which was 7 weeks, it meant I lost $1,136.80. Even worse, when I was actually on the road, I only cashed at like 2 tournaments, I think. When I was actually on the road, the rest of my cashing came at home. And so those 2 tournaments only made me $350 of my $1,700. If we subtract all my winnings and we just look at the raw costs of being on the road on a week-by-week basis, it was $1,380.37 per week. If you're able to be on the road longer, those costs will probably go down a little bit and you can travel different ways. But if we go back to that IRS allowance of how much they let you deduct from your taxes, which is not just like free money in your pocket, it just lowers your taxable incomes, that brings that total up to $10,021.98 of a loss. So being a semi-pro disc golfer in 2024 meant that I lost about $10,000. Or the way that I see it, I gained a lot of valuable experience. I was able to make a lot of videos. My brand was able to grow in a lot of different ways. So it's definitely more of like a long-term investment or like expense that I'm hoping will net returns in the future. But just being on the road for those 7 weeks at a $10,000 loss is now $1,431 per week that I spent to try to pursue this dream of being a pro disc golfer. And what's interesting is if I would have cashed at every single event that I played this year, which was 15 events that I could have cashed at, I still would have lost $6,611.98, even though I earned $3,410 more in payouts. And that's just assuming that I would make my average payout every single tournament, which is unlikely to happen because C tiers, you're winning C tiers and sometimes not making $350. That's still crazy to see. I still would have lost almost $1,000 per week on the road, even if I would have cashed at every single event this year. So you definitely need to be playing really well in order to make this feasible. Now, I definitely know that this is likely atypical, but I don't really have another frame of reference for exactly how much other people spend who are doing things slightly differently. So I just wanted to share my own experiences with this with you guys. And this is why a big part of my business financial plan, like when money comes in from this business, I have like a bunch of different allocations towards it. Paying myself, making sure that this can be sustainable for the future and putting some money away, and then also putting money away for tournaments for later down the road so that I can continue to travel and kind of go down those 2 paths that traveling gives me, which is making the content that I want to with the people that I really enjoy making content with on tour, but also trying to get on tour and be good enough at disc golf to be a professional athlete, professional disc golfer. And for now, I'm viewing it definitely more as an expense or an investment rather than expecting it to be profitable. Even in 2025, I don't think it's going to be profitable for me, which is why I'm saving money from like selling discs and YouTube ad revenue and sponsorship revenue from Infinite Discs. Big shout out. A portion of that goes towards funding travel so that I can continue to pursue this, even though I know it's probably not going to make me money this year, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, maybe never, but it's fun to be able to chase that dream. And there is one big expense that I have not included in here, and that is the personal training that I pay for. I started back right before I went to Waco, and I have been training with a guy who's a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He's worked with a lot of other, I'm not going to say other high-level athletes. He's worked with a lot of high-level athletes, and also now he works with me. And there's been a lot of changes to my body, as well as a really big change in my understanding of the biomechanics of disc golf. And I think it's something that's going to serve me a lot down the road, but it's also pretty expensive. It is definitely it's like one of my biggest expenses that I have that is not like things that I need for life, but currently not quite ready to share that. Hopefully at the end of next year, I'm able to share those numbers with you. For some reason, I just don't feel comfortable doing that right now, so I'm not gonna, and you can't make me. But for now, it's definitely like a speculative investment in the future. I think it's gonna bear out, but if like I was on the stock market and someone's like, oh, go invest in this, dude, I'm like, I'm probably gonna keep my money in the safer places. But I believe in it, and right now it's a little bit of a spec investment, and that's kind of what it looks like for me. I lost $10,000 last year trying to be a professional disc golfer, which is why I'm still definitely semi-professional. Negative $10,000 isn't gonna pay any bills. Back to throwing frisbees soon. Appreciate ya, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.